When my mother speaks to me in my native language, I respond to her in a Canadian accent. What she does not hear is that my words are laced with an apology, that the colonizers now occupy my tongue instead of her.
So when I first learned about the 60s scoop, I was in college. I was 29 years old. It was my first time that I was exposed to my culture. And I remember thinking I was like I thought me and my sisters were the only Native kids that were adopted. When I heard of the 60s scoop and residential school, I was just floored. I couldn't believe that there was thousands of other kids out there like myself. My paperwork says we were taken away because of alcoholism and neglect. That's what I believed about my parents, that they didn't want us, that they drank. But I see two loving people that look like they were in love. There was an intent to remove the children and take them into white homes where they might be better off and forget about who they are and become white children invested in the economy and becoming good workers and consumers, Canadians, right? Well, this is an entire government deciding what is best for Indigenous people based on their goals. When you think about Canada and how it was made, and what it's built on. I don't know if you know about the treaties, right? And obligations that the state has to fulfill treaties and honor those treaties. They made an agreement with us to follow through and to share those resources and the profit from those resources. Now you think about if you don't have Indigenous people invested in their land and their culture and the well-being of everything on that land, then you don't have to honor the treaties. Right? So what's the best way to not honor the treaties? Is to take those children away from those places that they would value and identify with and move them physically away from them so they don't care about them, so they're not invested in them. And they did the same thing with residential school. Even though I visually look Indigenous, I stuck out there because I was raised white. And I don't know if you can understand that, but I talk different, my dialect is different. My value system is different. My worldview is very different. And undoing all that, decolonizing, has been hard work for me because it's so much easier for me to just blend in and to act white because I don't have to deal with all the pain and trauma that my people have had to experience. So every day it's work for me. I forget sometimes that I'm Indigenous. When I remember it, it's because I experienced racism.
The loss of culture, identity, displacement, structural marginalization, and intergenerational trauma are some of the greatest harms that have affected adoptees.
So the reason why I do this work is because my children were impacted so much from my experience as an adoptee, and I'm impacted because of my mom's experience in residential school, and she's impacted by her experience from the colonization of Canada and the making of Canada through the treaty process and how it's been so violent for our people and the immense amount of loss of culture and language that we've experienced. It's so funny when I'm being called an activist. I used to be a very silent person. I never said anything. I learned how to be invisible. I didn't know how to use my voice. People were starting to speak for me, and I wasn't seeing anywhere in society what happened to my sisters and I being reflected in anywhere. Nobody was talking about the 60s scoop and the connection to missing and murdered Indigenous women and the harms of child welfare policies that have literally damaged so many families. And it keeps happening. And I thought, I need to start sharing my story. One thing that became apparent to me when I started doing work for volunteering for Family Sisters in Spirit was how many Indigenous women have been through the child welfare system. Almost every single Indigenous woman that is missing or murdered has been a product of the colonial child welfare system here in Canada. There's a mindset here that happened that when the government decided to enact these policies, they weren't thinking it was great for us. This is going to make, better for Indigenous people. This was going to make it better for Canadians, not for Indigenous people. Because we aren't profiting from it. We are living in poverty. We are like the most marginalized people in Canada, considering this is our land. And who has benefit from it is Canadians. And They benefit from the systemic racism that Canada has developed in making us second-class citizens in our own homelands. Well, I think the state is responsible for what has happened to Indigenous people. They created the problem with the making of Canada. You know, through treaties and policies, they've decided what they think is best for us. Yes, I believe collectively we have a responsibility to undo that harm and to work at building community together and understanding. Yes, Canadians have a moral obligation to be involved. You have to question, you know, you have to have that moral argument with yourself and say, am I perpetuating a system of racism here?
Colleen co-founded the Indigenous Adoptee Gathering Committee, which has helped adoptees from around the world reconnect through the sharing of experiences, and has also created a large network of support. Colleen continues her important work in bringing light to this concealed chapter of history in her documentary, The 60s Scoop, A Hidden Generation.